welcome to D10tion, where we pretend to know what we're talking about when it comes to D&D. I am your host, Fury of the Small, Tristan. To my right, we have Dice Goblin Sam, and to my left, we have Booyaka 619 Brandon. And only about 1% of the people who watch this will understand what the hell that was a reference to.
I don't even get it. That's my name.
It's a goblin pun, because guess what we're doing today, guys? Talking about goblins. So as we continue our delve into the different races of D&D, today brings us upon the small, tiny, furious race of...
You're telling me I can be a goblin?
Goblins. Much like when we talked about the orcs or bugbears and stuff like that, where you're used to seeing an enemy in the past editions of D&D, you can now play as some of these races.
I can now live my fantasy of being a barbarian goblin who just takes out kneecaps.
Give me them wobbly navies. Come here.
I need them for my armor.
Give me your kneecaps!
But yes, we can talk about how you can build a goblin barbarian and how that would work.
Well, it would work well.
So yes, goblins. Goblins are usually perceived as old enemies of D&D, the same kind of like fodder enemies as like kobolds.
Yep.
The things that DMs usually throw in like 4 for your session 0.
Your early level to be like, okay guys, go kill some goblins.
But now they have become much more of a developed race for you to use. Goblins, they live in like those unpleasant places, whether they're like more of a dungeon area or more unsuitable living, things like mountains.
I mean, they are a monster, technically.
Technically, yes. However, they, despite their stature and their kind of like crappy existence, they believe that they can bully whatever they want, and they can be cunning in battle.
I mean, if you want to think about it, it takes one orc to bully people, but if one goblin's trying to bully, it's not that threatening. And then you look behind you, and then there's about 100 goblins just staring at you. You're like, okay, yep, we're going to do that.
Yeah, we're going to listen to a bunch of you guys. But goblins, they live in tribes, which is why you're more likely to find a whole bunch of them bullying at least a
few other things.
Yes, versus like the lone goblin. If you find a lone goblin, he's almost more rare in that sense that he's by himself, unless you've let one run away after you've slaughtered his family.
And usually goblins are so fierce in this aspect because they know that they can be pushed around and bullied by others. So they'll take any opportunity to like show dominance over another creature as often as they can.
They have a small, weak dwarf that they've enslaved. They're just gonna treat them the worst of everyone.
Yeah, this is where you can see them. They're referred to as beastmasters and slave drivers. Which is
not heroic.
No, totally what I want is my good guy group.
Yeah.
So yeah, when they're referred to like as these beastmasters and slave drivers, it really comes down to they are known for being weak and not really sophisticated. They're goblins. Every like meme of a goblin that you see or hear about is usually to some degree very true.
Yeah. That being said, there is a degree of cleverness about them. For example, when they're coming across like a human society, they will sort of test the waters to see what they can get away with. Maybe by, breaking in at night and stealing things, and if they're not caught or if there's no consequence for them for that, then they'll move on to bigger things like stealing people or killing people. So there's a little bit of sophistication in that aspect. You also find a lot of like pit traps around their homes, a lot of like different maybe less direct combative techniques.
They're big fans of Home Alone.
Yeah. Set up like paint cans in the trees, like that kind of thing.
Well, and because they can be more sophisticated, because first off they even have a deity. With some of these more unsophisticated ones, you run into the choice of them not being very religious. They worship
say it.
Yeah.
Maglubiet?
Is it lubed yet?
Maglubiet.
And they're known as the Mighty One, as it's called. It's the force that drives them to dominate others, really.
It's their own ego.
Yes.
They decided to make
they
it
were right. It's the Napoleon complex. They've given spiritual status.
Yeah, we want our anger of being so tiny to be important so much. We made it a deity.
Right. But even with that, driving force, as much as they're driven to enslave and capture and use and bully, if they're met with opposition, they tend to run away like hail. They understand almost their place in that. They're like, we're going to just mess you up. Oh, crap, you're strong. Goodbye.
Yeah, no, they're definitely they're kids.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so in a lot of ways when you see, if there is, a lone human traveler and they come across a party of goblins, those goblins are going to be like, you're our slave now. Come with us or die. And the person's like, well, there's, 7 of them and only 1 of me. What can you do? So I think in numbers is where they have their strength,
Right.
It's certainly a goblin can't really one-on-one an orc, but if you get, 10 of them in a group, they stand a pretty decent chance. So.
Yeah, and the sad part is that whenever they, browbeat one of these lone traveling people, this is where you'll see people, creatures or people that have been enslaved by goblins tend to be treated poorly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that slavery isn't already a poor treatment,
or
but
maybe even more like pets,
This one's named Smoothie because his skin's so smooth.
I'm a ganassi. I'm made of water.
So smooth, Smoothie.
Silence, Smoothie, get back to work.
But yeah, so this is where they can be treated as pets, often still abused pets.
Yeah.
Or they're just treated very poorly, even more so. Because you mentioned their ego. This is very much where it comes, where it's like I mentioned the Napoleon complex.
I own someone.
Yes, they treat them even worse than even normal slaves.
Well,
which is an odd phrase that I've just said.
Treats them worse than their lowest caste in their 4-tiered society.
Yes.
Yeah. So a lot of the goblins' desire to dominate other things can also be seen in their caste system.
Right.
Like you said, there's 4 parts to it. So depending on where your family might fall in that caste system depends on how the rest of the tribe treats you.
What are the castes?
Well, there's 4 of them, so why don't, Sam, you start us off with the first
So
one.
the first one is a lasher. So a lasher is kind of like goblin nobles, in a sense. They're trained in battle. They tend to possess certain skills like strategy and tactical things, trap building, beast taming. And they usually, have some spellcasters in there. So they're kind of like the top tier up there.
Right.
I just imagine in a big goblin home, the daughter of the lasher just comes down and her hand stitched together Southern belle made of random knickknacks she's found.
Yeah.
I do it to clay.
Goblin bower guys. So they as far as lashers go, there's usually a tribal boss that they'll follow the lead of, but otherwise they sort of enforce the other goblins to do the bidding of this boss.
That's terrifying to think about.
Well, and usually that's often with whips, hence why they're called lashers.
Oh my god!
It all makes sense now. And then that brings us to the second highest, which isn't really a surprise, but they're hunters.
Dun, 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 the people who go and get food.
Yeah, the people that go get food, they're the ones that kind of have the knowledge of how to use weapons mainly. They don't really have a whole lot of other knowledge. That's their sole purpose.
They hunt game or they're scouts. In war, they're scouts. If not, they hunt food.
Right. I mean, the hunters are often known for being wolf riders.
Which is awesome to think about.
Because could you imagine it's like a pack of oh no, I see a pack of wolves in the distance. Hello, they have goblins on their back.
You just hear the shout of "Get the shinies!"
And then 5 dire wolves just come over the hill and they're just yeah!
Yeah. So this is why hunters are seen as that second tier in the cast. So you have the lashers, the hunters, and then Brandon, you bring us the
Gatherers.
What?
What they do is gather, they farm, they collect things. They're not really as strong or as specialized as the hunters or lashers, but they still do things. They're just not as fun as other ones. They do though, have their net, their caltrops, their lassos, their nooses. So they're very, I guess, into controlling other people, like through cow try to stop them or nets to move them or things like that. They're not. Yeah, they're not really as deadly though. Like we're getting down to the part where it's just like, here's the cool two, and then the other ones.
Well, in times of war, they do make poison for.
Yeah, I mean,
that's kind of. Neat.
Kind of. It's just, we have the aristocrats, wolf riders, and then when I need to, I take some berries and I smash them up real good.
But that's still better than the lowest.
Right,
system.
which is pariahs.
Right.
Pariahs are the lowest of the low. They're the dumb one, the dim-witted, the weak, the useless. They
if
are.
I may, the big bones.
Yeah.
Big bone hungry.
They are. They get the worst jobs. Cleaning out animal pens, like those wolf riders. The wolves need to be cleaned up after.
Digging mines.
For
shinies.
Yeah. Like all the hard labor and the grunt work and stuff like that. It's often, this is where you usually see the slaves. Like if they've enslaved someone or anything like that, that's where you usually see them, or their own kind. This is where they enjoy the opportunity to be supervised or they enjoy the opportunity to supervise and dominate other creatures. So if they have a slave, even the ones that already are pariahs, they're like, good, I have someone below me.
Yeah.
Even worse pariah.
Kind of gives them a little sense of control. And I mean, ultimately, like, this is all factored into an autocracy. So there's a tribal leader, and this one leader, it could be something that he was named a successor, or a successor by birth, or by murdered the other one. And it's often like when you find the transitions between these different tribal leaders, there's a lot of chaos that sort of ensues between there. Because let's say Brandon's previous tribal leader, and he's like, doesn't think he's going to die, so he's never named a successor, and then he dies. What then? So you see a lot of times that there's some discomfort between the caste systems then, because then you have a lot of infighting between, the higher-ups, and there's a lot more punishments for the pariahs of the group, so it can be a little strange every time a tribal leader dies if they haven't named a successor.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've brought up tribal leaders, and that usually comes with symbols of status. And goblins are odd little beings. This is another one of those things where when you talk about goblins, they have these status symbols, which are never really what you think they're going to be. Because when you think of status symbols, you think of like wealth or finally
a cool weapon or a nice horse and carriage or a magic item.
With goblins, they're not though. Goblins love their symbols of authority, and so when they have a tribe boss, this is again like what you were talking about, the head honcho of everything. They often they have something that kind of, and each tribe can be very different. So, like for example, this is from the book that goblins are in. Some of the examples are like earrings and notches in the ear. Nothing too extravagant there. It's just like, oh, you got a lot of earrings. You're in charge, apparently. Rib bones tied in their hair. A pelt made from raccoon, or a belt made from a raccoon pelt.
My favorite's number 6.
Yeah, a frog kept in a jar.
Just a frog.
See, I like a gnome's boot used as a hat. I think that's one of my favorite ones.
Or a pouch of toenail clippings from an allied ogre.
So if you guys were goblin tribe leaders, what would be your status symbol?
Frog in a jar.
No, I mean like if you made one up. Like, yeah, not like picking off the list.
Oh, because I was going to be like a war cry tattooed on my chest.
Probably a clump of moss from like a river nymph. Just this river nymph moss.
I don't know. That's a tough one. I'd want a big like championship belt that's made of just garbage components. Can. Kung. He's good side plate for this. Good. I am king.
See,
I am king of kings.
I think I'd go a bit more mystical. I would collect shiny rocks and say, "This rock give you power, grow strong."
So
this rock blind people. I'd sort of be like a witch doctor goblin,
or just a white girl who thinks stones has.
Exactly, like a crystal.
This rock blinds people. It technically does. Just throw it in the eye.
See, rock blind.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean this is where they're really odd. Usually, there's nothing really of really high status. Some of them make sense, more like the war cry tattoo in the chest, or lots of earrings, bugs kept for snacking.
16 is kind of actually pretty cool.
Yeah, that one's a little bit terrifying at how they got them, and that which is owl bear feathers as a cloak.
An entire cloak is made of owl bear feathers. Like, how'd you get them?
Yeah,
there's like a story of like one lone goblin who takes down an owl bear. He's
war
legend.
It's really just one who found a dead one. Just like. Dun, 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 dun.
And speaking of the more mystical side of goblins, they do have their own sort of spellcasters, though it is kind of rare.
It's more of they have a goblin term for it, which is the booyaga.
The booyags.
Booyag 619.
So it's me.
That's you.
That's what I do. I cast the spells by saying random goblin words.
Right. Well, booyag means magic and goblin,
which is. If that doesn't explain what kind of stuff we're about to get into, I don't know what will.
Right. And like Sam said, this is really rare in goblins. They lack the intelligence to really study wizardry. Because what goblin's going to sit down with a book?
But they sure will be like, you got magic? I give soul.
Right. But, I mean, a patron, any smart patron, is going to be like, yeah, but what are you going to do for me? Like, you're sold, or you're like a goblin, whatever.
Unless we run across a whole clan of just
and even their
goblins.
god isn't so much the type to be doling out magic. So there's no easy way for them to get it.
Right, which makes it much more rare. But it does happen, and this is where you're going to look out for certain types of booyags.
Tradition's a big one.
Yeah.
I was a booyag. I will teach my kin to be booyags.
Right, or if you do run across a sorcerer goblin, that is usually passed down through bloodline.
Yeah.
So that very much, like you said, tradition.
Yeah. So usually with the booyag, they kind of have divided up into their own separate systems. So like a booyag caster usually serves under like another powerful entity, so like a hobgoblin wizard. They had maybe like stolen their spell book and maybe learned a little bit just by sort of mimicking the gestures they'd seen. So there's a little bit there as far as that goes. There's also the wielder. So maybe they found a magic item that has granted them the ability to use magic, like a necklace of fireballs. Fire! There's also the booyag whip. So this is maybe something that was gifted to another goblin.
It's slightly magic.
Gives them the ability to dominate others a little bit. Mm-hmm. There's also a slave, so that's more of the warlock type thing. Maybe they found a patron who was like,
whatever.
I guess, yeah. And then there's the booyag.
The magic.
Which is basically a little bit more like wild magic.
Mm.
So if they were going to be like a goblin sorcerer, it'd be like a wild magic sorcerer.
Right. And these are all things, because these are ones that you can actually pick, right, when you create a character, correct? Because it seems like each one has a different, you can...
Yeah.
Like the whip has a 1d3 other goblins that slavishly obey its orders, and stuff like that. So it definitely seems like it's...
Look into those, depending on which one you want to do when you make your goblin barbarian.
So now we're going to move on to traits. And this is, as we talk about them, the bonuses, the general stats.
The mechanics.
So to begin with, you're a goblin. You picked goblin as your race. So to start off with, you're going to get a +2 to your dex and a +1 to your con.
Which is so weird when you think about it.
Yeah, the dex kind of makes sense.
The con?
The con...
Well, you have to think of it as goblins are now
rotten food for the past 8 years.
Exactly, and they live in the unfavorable conditions. Their bodies are more attuned to that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm just so used to think about con as a
like
mechanic,
strength-based stat type thing. Yeah.
But you have to think of it as like roll a con to see if you can keep down that beer.
What?
Goblins, they don't live all that long. They know life is short, like they are. And
you threw it, now I'm not going to let it die.
And so goblins reach adulthood at the age of 8, but they live up to 60.
Up to 60, unless you pick a class that aging doesn't kill you.
Like a goblin monk.
You just live a lot longer.
Yeah.
Right, or you're cursed as a goblin.
Yeah. As for their alignment, they're typically evil.
Wow.
But like with everything else, you can't have the few rare one-offs of good or neutrality. So
I don't like how we kill people. And all the other goblins. How big are they?
They're usually between 3 and 4 feet tall. They are
about 40 to 80 pounds, and they are considered a small creature.
So you're saying I could use catapult to fling my unencumbered goblin?
Well, I mean, that would give them more walking speed than what they have, which is surprisingly 30.
For being small, it's because they're so fleet of foot.
Yes, because this is where, when we're talking about things like the halflings and the gnomes, even dwarf, they tend to only have a walking speed of like 25.
Right.
Which, of course, 5 feet doesn't seem like that much of a difference, but it can make a difference in the long run.
Oh, yeah, 5 feet between, a fire trap going off and then you making on the other side.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that is a bonus to still being playing Goblin, because you're still a small creature, but you do get the 30 feet. Along with that 30 feet, you get dark vision.
Yay! Another race that actually has useful vision.
Because you never realize it until you get into a dark room and then none of your party can see in the dark.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh no, we didn't plan ahead for that.
My goggles of the night are a blessing.
Yes, but that's if you can get them.
Right.
And like I mentioned earlier, they have Fury of the Small. Because they're tiny.
Which is an amazing ability if you're thinking oh, what do goblins have? Well, whenever you attack a creature that is, any attack or spell that is a size larger than you, so everything except for tiny and small, you can deal extra damage and it equals your level.
Mm-hmm.
It's per short or long rest, but it's once per level. So if you're a 5th level, you're going to deal an extra 5 damage once per, short rest.
just for being small.
So imagine you're a level 20 and you're fighting the big bad guy and you're just we need to deal 20 extra damage. All I need to do is hit. If I hit, 20 extra damage guaranteed.
Right. This is how Sam wins most of our arguments.
It's true. But I also win because I also have that nimble escape, as do goblins, which gives them the ability to take the disengage or hide action as a bonus action on each of their turns.
That is, because that's one of those big benefits of, choosing rogue as a whole class.
Or monk,
Or
except for the wind.
yeah. I mean, that's definitely a huge advantage just to have that automatically just because of your race. And with that race, you will also be able to read, write, and speak common, and wait for it.
Orcish. Oh, wait. Goblin?
I almost said primordial. No, they speak goblin.
The goblins speak goblin.
Yeah. I wonder where they got goblin from.
I am vexed by this.
So yeah, those are kind of the stats in the rundown. Again, goblins were originally villains. They were fodder like kobolds, orcs, even other things like
orcs. They were fodder like the troglodytes, like fairies, hobgoblins, things like that. The tiny things. They're generally the ones that's welcome to playing Dungeons and Dragons. Here's some goblins.
Learn how to combat. Here you go.
Yeah, goblins are very much usually. They're another one of those ones where when you think of what the outside world knows about D&D, goblins are always one of those things because it's in every fantasy thing. Everything that deals with the fantasy world tends to have some form of goblin in it, and this is the most recent rendition of goblins. Which is now a playable race.
Which I think is really great because maybe you're in a campaign that's a little less serious, and you can have a lot of fun with goblins.
Oh yeah,
right.
Especially with your goblin barbarian. I mean, you guys keep making fun of it, but plus the con, plus the dex, there's your AC up. Also, then I just got to pump my highest stat into strength, and I have a barbarian.
So the world's strongest goblin.
See, I would want to be the goblin warlock that has a really shitty arrangement with the patron. I give soul and all my money. Make it a little better.
I give their money.
All right, now we're talking. I give their souls. Done.
You keep talking about a goblin barbarian. All I can think about is all these small creatures all doing like dwarf wrestling, because those exist. For those of you who aren't wrestling fans, there are still some they're usually phrased, and I'm waiting for them to change the term, but midget wrestling. These are actual companies.
So now I need to make in the campaign where you guys walk up on goblin wrestling.
Yeah.
And it's just like a bunch of goblins.
Well, I mean, like, what is it? I just bought that card game while we were in Canada not long ago, where it was a goblin wrestling card game.
Yeah.
So don't underestimate them.
Yeah, don't underestimate goblins for sure. And again, despite the fact that their whole like history and knowledge base from what people know about goblins is a negative thing, don't let that deter you from picking goblins if you like aspects of them. If you like them being a little bit more carefree, or if you want to, play something completely different, from what the norm of what a goblin is. Like, it's a noble goblin who was adopted by some, like a family of halflings or something.
And I mean, if you want, obviously Critical Role has a really good example of not the brave, of what a really interesting dynamic with that character.
Right. I mean, this is where, most, especially in that world where you see it, goblins aren't really happy to be seen. So with Not, she wears
porcelain mask. It's like, oh,
I'm definitely just a halfling.
just really weird skin.
So I mean, so this is definitely one of those races, much like when we've talked about like bugbears, orcs, and stuff like that, where they can be perceived as being bad, but you can make them what you want. I mean, they're great for things like evil campaigns or one shots. But if you want to use them for a good one, there is a way. As a DM, there's definitely ways to have like NPCs or villains and stuff like that you run into.
Oh, trust me.
As a DM, you can have a lot of fun with it.
Oh, trust me.
So, so it's definitely one of the things that if there's something about it that you like them being goofy and using the word booyog for magic, if you like the fact that it has dark vision or the status symbols or one that's escaped, that kind of thing. There's a number of things that you can do with that depending on what you want to do with goblins. Now, we usually end these things with goblins that the favorite ones we've interacted with or made. I know personally I haven't made one, and I think we should eliminate Not, because we just talked about the Critical Role character.
Right.
You're going to say, I was going to say you're a barbarian.
Yes. You joke. I'm actually made of a.
All I want to do is make like a whole league of just like goblin wrestlers.
He is the path of berserker. He's the path of berserker goblin. He just goes nuts.
Yeah, I do have a goblin rogue.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
So we took it two different ways. You leaned into the dexterity.
Right.
I'm using the dexterity as just like a stat to help me just pump more into strength.
And then I'll just say, how about a goblin druid of the spores?
Interesting.
Instead of his status symbol, he just has a bunch of mushrooms.
Yes.
He
lives in a mushroom. He's a smurf.
I feel like I get the feeling that this would be one of those goblins that has like fleas as pets and like
Springy, where are you? Bing, bing.
There you are.
He just lives in a large mushroom in the forest. Like, he lives alone, but he's just straight up smurf.
How's it gonna be called the adventure then?
Who said he was an adventure? Maybe it's an NPC.
True.
So like, you come across in the forest a very large mushroom. You're like, that's a big ass mushroom. It has a door. What? You knock on the door. Hello, I am Goblin Man of Druids.
That's a terrible name. You need a workshop then.
Names are hard. I don't have a name. I live in a mushroom, for Pete's sake. Who's Pete? It's Pete right there, Flea.
Okay. That's goblins. As you see, when you talk about goblins, you become a goblin.
Clearly. And apparently, all goblins sound like this.
They sound a high-pitched voice.
They sound a lot like kobolds, apparently.
You've only done that. Well, kobolds are different. I've made their voices slightly different. The only reason you guys do it is because I have made kobolds be like, and then goblins are like, they're at two different tones.
Goblinoids. Fun stuff.
Yes. That's why the goblins probably, like, you interact with the goblin, they're like,
In most games, they don't sound like that. I just like making them higher pitched because they're small.
So you're sizist.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, that's Goblins. Again, this with all the races that we talk about, definitely look into it. Talk to your DM. Don't be afraid to change things about them that you would want to change to some degree. Not necessarily mechanics, but more about if you want to play a character. There's always a way around making it a bit more of what you want to play. But yeah, until next time, we talk about the next one. D10tion dismissed.
May the fury of the small be with you!